So random thoughts while driving about how my time in Afghanistan helped me trust the scriptures more, specifically the Gospels. So in college, sophomore, junior year, there was a girl, another cadet with me, and we were walking to class, and she made the comment, she asked me about my religious beliefs, said I was a Christian, and then she made a comment, it's like, yeah, my whatever professor said that the Gospels wouldn't hold up in a court of law, that they're too contradictory, the details don't match, they would all be thrown out, and there's no reason to believe Christianity. I don't know if she really believed that or not. Turns out later on I found out she was just flirting with me, trying to change my mind about some beliefs I had. But that stuck with me because I couldn't refute it. I didn't know enough about the history of them, and while I had read all of them at some point, I had never read them in a deep study to even pick up on how details were different. And there's a number of them that are famous about how the details of the resurrection vary from gospel to gospel. How many angels there were, who saw Jesus first. Just, there's definitely, there's questions there if you don't do a deep dive. And so that, I just stayed in the back of my head as like, oh, well, that's probably one of those things that, I just need to take on faith or whatever. Like, that was just kind of my stance at the time. I despise that outlook now. I was young and not as, I'm a little wiser now than I used to be. If you have questions on your faith, I firmly believe you should dig into them and try to understand them and push yourself to read views that are different from what you know in order to understand what kind of evidence supports the opposing views. So anyway, Afghanistan, how that ties to this. My unit, my Cav troop, was in their largest firefight when I was stuck in Kuwait coming back from leave. And I absolutely hated. I felt ashamed to not be there and to come back, and these guys had been through hours-long, or possibly hours-long fight, and I'll get to that. And I was in a tent in Kuwait just doing nothing because I couldn't get on a rotator back. But because I wasn't there, we had to fill out a whole lot of paperwork and do a report on this fight. And so my boss tasked me, since I was, an independent observer, if you will, to interview everyone there, compile all the sworn statements, and then write up basically an official history of the event. So I thought that was kind of a pointless endeavor because I didn't even get there until 3 days after the fact. And the longer in the military, the longer after an event, the more people's stories meld. And especially before, just reality. Like, if you have a squad that's about to be interrogated, they are almost, and they know it's going to happen, they are almost certainly going to sit down and get their story straight so they're all saying the same thing. So yeah, in that regard, then I show up and I get tasked to do this, and everyone's told, hey, LT's coming around, you need to, he's going to question you about things, just, fill out your sworn statements, and then we'll go. So I had people fill out their sworn statements, I asked them additional questions, compiled them from everyone present, it was about 60 people, and then went from there. And right off the bat, I realized the enormity of the discrepancies. When the fight started, so everyone agreed that we opened fire first, that one of our soldiers yelled out, they didn't agree on that, so that we initiated the fight, and that either one of our soldiers started firing or he yelled out that he saw Taliban in the distance, and then someone else started firing. But at least everyone agreed it initiated on our side. But the time period that it started was somewhere between 12:30 in the morning and 5 a.m. These are all from people present at this event. Every single person was there. And the time period had a 4.5 hour spread as to when it started. The length of the fight was recorded as somewhere between 5 minutes to 2.5 hours, depending on who I asked. Now, I get how time flies or completely stops when you're in a firefight. Like, your sense of timing with the adrenaline, especially if it's your first firefight, thrown out the window. But it just was amazing to see that much of a discrepancy between first shot and last shot. 5 minutes to 2.5 hours. And almost every other event that was part of it, incoming mortar rounds, a soldier just started unloading his grenade launcher from behind a wall without ever looking over it, and a lot of people noticed how he sprinted across the courtyard of a building and just started firing blindly. Several people commented on that, but when that occurred in the event and how many rounds he fired and where he was standing or hid, all changed. It was a major event. They were all there, but their stories did not neatly line up. And that makes sense. It was an emotional, in a sense, event. Certainly, its own. There were incoming machine gun rounds and mortars, so highly emotional, traumatic in a way. We didn't take any casualties though, so that part was wonderful. And yeah, but there are all these discrepancies, and so when you compare that to the Gospels, if they lined up perfectly and every single one of them said the same thing about the resurrection, I would think that they all just got together, sat down, and said, "Hey, we got to make these stories match," as opposed to what really happened, where they were written independently by eyewitnesses who were not sitting next to each other and comparing notes. So it absolutely added validity to me for the Gospels. Now, if they ever say anything that is completely contradictory, then that's an important distinction. Like when people in my investigation, when guys would say something that didn't line up with someone else, I had to question, is this someone adding more detail or a different detail, or is it something that's completely contradictory? Like, where exactly was this grenade launcher guy firing from versus whether he was, even there or not? Because where he could have changed positions and fired from multiple spots. In fact, he did. Things like that, but one guy only noticed him at one spot, and then one guy only noticed him 10 minutes later at another spot. But they're not contradictory. They can both exist in reality, but they only saw it as a snapshot. So, yeah, absolutely. My experience in interviewing people with life-changing, traumatic experiences has just taught me that the difference, there are no contradictions, in that the Gospels are really just made up of eyewitnesses writing down how they went through that experience. Anyway, food for thought. Catch you later.